I think this is a man who needs no introduction whatsoever, but in case you do, this is General Michael Flynn. General Michael Flynn, thank you very, very much for taking the time on obviously a busy day. I'm going to get right to it so we don't waste any of your time, sir. So with everything that's going on, we got a couple questions which I think we're going to hear during the press conference. What's your opinion on whether or not President Trump either had or didn't have the authority to fly these Venezuelan hoods out of our country?
I mean, 100%, without a doubt, President Trump has the authority to do exactly what he is doing. These judges are out of control, and something's going to have to be done. I mean, I think that there's various constitutional issues that have been raised by these activist judges. And I'm talking about some of these judges are not activists. They're anti-American. But the President of the United States of America has 100% authority to do exactly what he's doing. This is not going to be overruled by the Supreme Court, like the executive authority of the President of the United States. So, that you can take to the bank. And I will tell you, the other thing that the president has is he's got national emergency, not just national security responsibilities, but he has national emergency authorities, many of which national emergencies, and I've written a lot about this over the years, but particularly in the last year, the President of the United States has the ability to declare a national emergency for various domestic issues, right? Mm-hmm. And these are, and I wouldn't say, in fact, I used the wrong word. He has the ability and the authority to impose a national emergency for national emergencies that have already been signed off on by presidents over decades. Okay. So there's these things called national emergencies, and I think it's about 43 of them, and about a third of them are for overseas type issues like, nuclear war or in the event of a nuclear attack. I mean, there's a national emergency, right? As an example, or like a canal or a commercial lane is shut down, like President Trump just took military action against the Houthi rebels in Yemen because of the critical waterway of what's called Bandar Abbas, the southern end of the Red Sea. We have not been able to transit there. I mean, it's been months that anybody's been able to transit commercial vessels through there because of the missiles and the threat imposed by the Houthis. So the president used his authority to be able to go and severely punish the Houthi rebels for doing that. I mean, they basically, the Houthis were doing that for the past year of the Biden administration. And the Biden administration, instead of doing anything about it, they took the Houthis off of the terrorist watch list. I mean, they basically said, no, we're not going to designate them as terrorists anymore. So back to your question, Barry, the president has the authority because we are in the midst of a domestic national emergency right now with these groups. And the Tren de Agua, right? They're one. And now we've only seen a couple hundred. Everybody's seen the videos coming out of El Salvador with Bukele doing such a great job, but those are only a couple of hundred. Right. We know of close to 5,000 of these thugs are in our country. So we are in a state of certainly a state of physical siege in some places. And that siege is being supported by leftist mayors and leftist governors. I mean, Barry, we are still in the middle of a I would just call it a bit of a soft coup, although it has hardened up quite a bit because of the last 4 years of allowing in these criminals, these terrorists, and these staggering numbers of illegals into our country. So back to your question, because you got me on a little bit of a roll here, Barry.
That's okay. That's fine.
And I'm going to be posting some of this probably a little bit later today, but I've written about national emergencies, and I've written about the types of national emergencies that the president of any president has that are already in place. So it's not a matter of Trump writing another executive order or declaring something new. These are things that already exist. And about a third of these national emergencies, they actually go back to the 1950s in some cases, but about a third of these are domestic related. Okay. For example, if there is a huge natural disaster, right? Like we saw with Helene in North Carolina, or the fires out in California, or the fires out in Lahaina, Maui, Hawaii, right? I mean, those are national emergencies that require the federal government to step in. Under Biden, they failed, totally miserably failed. And they did not use or leverage those abilities, because with a national emergency comes federal funding, that only the president of the United States can authorize. So that would be another example of a national emergency. These basically these tornadoes that we just experienced again in the middle of the country. I think their numbers, forgive me, but I think the numbers like high 30s. It's 36 or 38 people that were killed, sadly, tragically. Our hearts go out to them. So that's another example. But this threat that was imposed on us by the previous administration. Tren de Agua did not impose this threat. Right. They were allowed to come into this country because of the failures of the Biden administration and, frankly, the failures of the left. So the president has the full authority. And the other thing I want people to do, Barry, is I want them to go back and read the oath of office for the president of the United States of America. Okay? People need to go back and read the oath of office that only the president takes. He's the only one that takes it. I've taken the oath of office plenty of times to protect and defend the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, bear true faith, allegiance to the same, all that stuff, right? The president of the United States, for the presidency, they add one word, and they add the word preserve. Actually, it's a phrase, preserve the Constitution. The word preserve is only given to the president of the United States for his constitutional oath of office. People need to read that. It's short, probably take, a minute and a half to read it, if that. Okay. And people need to read that because that means a lot. It means that the president of the United States has the responsibility to preserve the country, right? To preserve the Constitution. All I have is, as a military guy or as serving in a federal office, I have a responsibility to defend and protect based on, what the president of the United States directs me, particularly in the executive branch of government. The president of the United States has a responsibility to preserve this country, and that is super, super important, and it's constitutional. And so it's longer than you wanted on your great question, but people need to understand this stuff. I mean, this is an education in who we are as America, right?
Right. So I got another question for you. It kind of dovetails off of what you just said. He's also invoking the Aliens Invasion Act, or what it is, and it's based upon wartime. And one of the questions I've had, and I've talked to other people, is it may take an act of Congress to declare war, which we are, would be involved in. But who defines, and how would you define wartime? I mean, there's wars happening all around the world. So are we in a wartime situation?
Yes. So the answer to that question, the latter question, is, are we in a wartime situation? Yes. And just this year alone, never mind the last four, but just actually, and I won't say 2025 because the stats aren't in it, so I'm actually thinking 2024. 2024, we've had close to 200,000, I say, killed in action on the streets of America by fentanyl. Okay? So let's just say it's 100,000. That's more than the last 20 years of war in Afghanistan and Iraq combined, right? So we have killed in action on the streets. Let's just use the number 100,000, just so I'm not overstating it, because I know it's more than 100, but let's just say 100,000. So just this past year alone, never mind 2021, 2022, 2023. So 100,000 killed in action on the streets of America by fentanyl, which is imposed by, it's created by China and other countries now in Asia, but principally by China. They then bring it in through Canada, through their alliance, their alliance network through Canada, which is really these drug cartels. So they bring it in through Canada and Mexico, right? Mexico was the principal route of entry, But then all of a sudden, Canada started to pick up, and picked up big time over the last year and a half. So 100,000 killed in action just this past year. And then you have to add in the number that were wounded in action, because I'm using military terms, killed in action and wounded in action. Wounded are those people that were debilitated but not killed by fentanyl, all right? And that includes, not only physically injured because they weren't killed by it, but they were injured by it, and they had to, and they're physically injured, maybe in some cases for the rest of their lives. Certainly law enforcement and first responders who have to go clean this stuff up. But others that are affected, others that are wounded by this fentanyl, by this weapon system, this narcotic that is a weapon system that the Chinese have imposed on our country. So the others that are wounded are the families and the family members that are part of, I was at the Department of Justice the other day with a lovely young woman whose son was killed by fentanyl, thinking he was taking a Percocet, and he ended up taking a fentanyl, and he died, right? And she actually was a great young lady. She spoke at the Republican National Convention last summer.
Yeah, I remember her.
And, so that's an example, a personal example of for her, in her case, where it was killed in action. So we are in a state of war. We're in a state of war. That's part of it. There is another part, and I just talked a little bit about it, with the domestic challenges that this president, who was elected in a huge historic way, is having with elements within the left. When I say the left, I don't use the word Democrat or the phrase Democrat Party anymore, Barry, because they're not. It's been taken over by a Marxist left, and it's Marxism with American characteristics, of course, but Marxism, and these are Marxists. They're not Democrat activists. These are Marxists, and they are aligned with radical Islamists, and that's what we're facing in this country today. Like it or not, folks, live with me for the decades of experience that I got, but live with me for a couple of weeks, and you'll see, you'll become believers overnight as to what we're facing, because it's really a dangerous time. And that's why when people are going to go, well, they only do that during time of war, and Congress has to declare war. Well, then you know what, Congress, get off your dead end, your rear ends, and do what you think is right. But Congress has been part of the problem. The establishment, the Rhino, the Uniparty, right? They're part of the problem. There's some good ones up there, but not enough. Definitely not enough. And so as we roll through this coup, this ongoing coup that started in 2015, and it went, real hard on, 2016, 2017, and they haven't let up. And they're not, this time around, they're not being, well, actually, I would take that back a little bit. They're being a little bit more subtle in how they do it versus how they did it in the 2016, 2017 timeframe. But the subtlety is in forms of use of weapons like lawfare, right? Over 100 actions right now, over 100 lawsuits against this current administration. Instead of just saying, oh, okay, so people think, these idiots think that it's okay to keep these guys in our country committing crimes, raping, brutally murdering, brutally raping boys and girls, sex trafficking children, slave trafficking children. That's what we're seeing. These are conditions of war, and I'm okay with what President Trump has done. And like I said, he has the full authority to do what he's doing. And thank God we have people like him. And thank God we actually have a president like Bukele down in El Salvador, which, he's like saying, bring him on. But now his prison down there, I think they can only take like 40,000. That's not big enough. So we're going to have to find other places, because we're talking about,
wow.
And I'll give you one other example that I'll just break some news on your show, right? Because I just worked this over the last probably 3 days. Taliban and ISIS and Al Qaeda, as they have sort of formed together, as they have converged together, they control Afghanistan. Well, we've been paying whatever it is, like some crazy number, like $40 million a week to Afghanistan. Yes. A week. So that has been stopped, I believe, and don't hold me to that, but I believe that's been stopped. I did some digging and looked at passport requests from Afghanistan over the last 4 years, right? Visa requests, the number of passports that were given to people that were known terrorists, right? Or that were designated as such. It's close to 24,000 coming out of just Afghanistan that we know that we're giving documents to come into this country. Okay, wow. This is like whoever cut that deal ought to be brought in for investigation. And if they're found to be, that they were taking money off the top just to give that back, something is not right with that. So there's 24,000. Those are Afghans. Okay, wow. Those are Afghans. Never mind these Venezuelans. And I told you the number there is about 5,000.
Right.
Okay, the Bukele thing is, I think it was 200. So we're looking at large scale numbers that we have in our country that are dangerous, that are dangerous human beings in this country. And the Democrat Party, the left, Marxist left in this country, they want these people to stay here. This is out of control, Barry. So I'm on, you got me on a roll, buddy.
No, I love it. I mean, it's someone with your knowledge, I just love to just dig a little bit and see what you're thinking. So in that regard, Pam Bondi, fresh on the job. Kash Patel, fresh on the job. Dan Bongino starts today. And you mentioned the trafficking and some of that stuff. Many of us, me included, were waiting for the Epstein files to drop, and we all were under the impression that was a big deal. But what we're seeing now, in my estimation, are things of a much higher priority because of what these judges are doing. And where does that fall in your estimation in terms of what Trump and Bondi and Patel have to work on first, and then how do you think these different crimes and investigations need to play out?
Yeah, and that's a great question, actually, and it's a really smart question because I see a lot of stuff on the internet, social media, and everybody's bitching and griping and complaining, right? I mean, everybody, and I'm not going to say that I don't either. I do, but your question is really smart because you're asking about where should the priorities be, right? And back to what I said about the president, having a responsibility to preserve the Constitution. The main priority for the president of the United States, Barry, is the safety and security of the American people. Safety and security of the American people, no doubt. So as he's juggling things, and let me take a step back. So if Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and all these other cabinet members, if they had their full teams in place, we might be able to juggle a couple of, crystal balls and not drop any of them, right? We may be able to juggle more than 1 or 2 or 3 at a time, but they don't have their teams in place. We're only 2 months into this, right? We're 2 months into this, and there's a lot of people that still need to be hired. Hell, we still have ambassador positions overseas in really critical places, and they're not filled. They're still filled by Obama people.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that's probably true too.
Yeah.
But Biden people, they're still filled by the diplomat. The ambassadors were brought home, but the diplomats who were the number 2s there, they're all from the Biden administration. So the most important thing right now is from the president's perspective, is safety and security of the American people. And so it makes sense for the president to say, okay, guys and gals, Tom Homan is my pointy end of the spear. Secretary Noem, DHS, Secretary Hegseth, DOD, Secretary Rubio, Secretary of State. You guys are going to pile on that problem. We've got to get these criminal terrorist thugs out of our country because they are damaging our country. They're killing people.
Hey, right.
And we've got to limit the flow, and we have to stop the flow coming across our borders, plural. We have got to reduce the amount of fentanyl. They just captured another batch of fentanyl the other day, and when I was over at DOJ, they made an example of it. And I think if I remember right, Pam Bondi said that the amount that they captured could kill, like undiluted, could kill like 100 million people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is nuts. So safety and security. The second thing on the Epstein files, because I was upset about it too, right? I mean, the president said, do it. Kennedy files, let's get them out there, unredacted. Let's get them out there, right? I'm a big, anti-child trafficking, anti-sex, child sex trafficking advocate. We've got to stop this madness. We can't, and it's not just, whatever guy on the street. These are elites that are involved in this. P. Diddy, Epstein. I mean, they're not working with just, excuse my Irish, Joe shit the rag on St. Patty's Day. Joe shit the rag on the corner of Pete and Repeat, right?
Right.
These are people that are up in the higher echelons of our government, higher echelons of other institutions like academia, Hollywood, the media that are involved in these things, right? And other governments. They have to be exposed. But right this second, do they represent a clear and present danger to the United States of America or to human beings on the United States? Some could argue with me that they do, and because they might still be involved in it. But their day is going to come. I do believe, until Pam Bondi gets more of her team in place. I mean, you mentioned Dan Bongino is a great friend, great guy. He starts work today. Yeah. I mean, you got to figure out, you got to figure out where's my, do I have an office, what phone? You got to get issued all this badges. I mean, government doesn't move that fast. That's why we, the people, we have to keep the pressure on. We got to keep the pressure on, Barry. Your show, is a great show. You have a great audience. You know what your audience wants. Your audience needs to keep the pressure on. Don't stop doing what you're doing, because we got to raise it up. We got to raise our voices up, right? Digital soldiers. I'm big on that, and citizen journalism. There's going to be a press conference today. I think the press conference is going to be about Ireland a little bit, and it should be because we're looking at I call it the Ottoman Empire 2.0, and some of that empire is right here in the United States of America. And this is not an attack on all Muslims, okay? I've written a book, Field of Fight: How to Win the War Against Radical Islam and Its Allies. It was a bestseller. I wrote it back in 2016. So these are not, and I've fought for 5 years of direct combat operations against principally, and fundamentally, the radicalized Islamists that are around the world because of the attacks of 9/11 principally. But so this is not about going against all Muslims. This is going against a part of the Muslim community that is radicalized, and they have subjugated their own societies. The people that kill Muslims the most are themselves. It's not, honestly. So, but this is what's going to be talked about, I think, today, is because Ireland and England, right, the United Kingdom, these and frankly, you can take it all the way over into mainland Europe. They are under incredible levels of threat because they have allowed their globalist ideas and ideology, this globalist shift that these people want to basically allow this wide open borders, free flow of humanity. And guess what? The abundance of people that are coming out of Muslim countries, which is about the northern half of Africa, so down, what's called the Sahel and south of the Sahel, all the way up to places like Alexandria, Egypt, Tripoli, Libya, Tunis, Tunisia, Algeria, all the way over to Morocco. They're bustling with people, and they're moving into Europe, and they've been for well over a decade, almost 20 years now, almost 20 years. Some of that was caused by wars in Iraq, for sure, and so I would, from an analysis perspective, can somebody say, well, the goddamn United States of America, if they didn't attack Iraq, and to a degree, I could probably argue that. In fact, I would probably be one of the best proponents of that side of the argument, because I have said that was one of the biggest strategic mistakes that we made this century so far, was attacking Iraq, because it was unnecessary when we were already battling over in Afghanistan. But all that's looking in the past. What we face right now, what Europe faces, is an Ottoman Empire 2.0, no doubt. We have them on our streets right here. We've seen them with this Palestinian nonsense in college campuses. And you got to wonder, okay, so I'm looking at a guy the other day on one of these protests. He looked like he was about my age. He was a white dude, and he's got a mask on, but his mask came down. He's got a sign, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what the heck is this guy doing? Right? What is he? This guy got? So he's not a Muslim, and if he is, he didn't appear to be. And I'm not talking about in his facial tone, right? He didn't sound to me like he was preaching, Islam. Right. It sounded like he was preaching activism, and he was preaching anti-Americanism and hatred and spewing it constantly. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, because now I'm looking around at these other people in masks. They're all in black. They got backpacks. They got these great big signs. You got to say to yourself, okay, so when they show up to here, when they show up to like some new place, who's actually out there painting the signs that they're holding up? Who's getting this stuff ready? Because it seems like all of a sudden they show up and shit, they got everything ready, right? So somebody's behind this, right? There's large sums of money behind this, and I do believe, I do believe that, one of the names of the groups is called Arabella Advisors. Are you familiar with that name?
Yes.
Yeah. So Arabella Advisors is a George Soros created and funded organization. His son pretty much runs it, Alex. And then, if you look at their breakdown is very sophisticated. And it's billions and billions of dollars, principally to cause the United States of America to collapse on our own weight inside. Like Abraham Lincoln said in 1838, no nation, no country will take a drink from the Ohio or take a step on the Blue Ridge with a Bonaparte for a commander. Never. If America is to die, it will die by its own suicide. And we are in that process. We're in the midst of those times. And now he said that in 1838. Here we are in 2025, almost 200 years later, and we're facing these issues because we have been in a period of, I believe, moral decline, and for decades, we've lost sight of the family unit. We had 40 years of killing babies, and that's still going on, and we've just allowed ourselves to give up on. I use the phrase local action has a national impact, Barry. People have got to become citizens of this country once again and not turn it over to some elected political hack that all they're doing is filling their pockets with our money. Look at what Doge and Elon have found out.
I want you to hold that, because I'm going to ask Ashley if she get in touch with your people and get you back on. We're getting ready to jump to this press conference, but I have one last question, which I'm sure a lot of people want to know the answer to. Given what you've been through, the mud that they've dragged you through, and you went through it and you come out stronger on the other end here, is there a seat somewhere in the Trump administration for you, or do you think you can make more stuff happen on the outside?
Yeah, I think I'm far more effective doing what I'm doing right here with you right now.
Okay.
And that's an influential position of some authority, referent authority that they call it, but because you get into the government and you get trapped.
Yeah.
You get trapped. And I know that, and so I know what we're up against. I know what we're facing. I know all the players in the Trump administration. I have great relationships with them, especially the president, and I think we'll be okay. But it's not going to be without a lot of sacrifice in the months ahead here. So anyway, Barry, thank you so much for having me on. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you and your audience.
Thank you.
And I'll get back on.
Invaluable knowledge you dropped upon us today. And I love when I talk to people and they give me homework. You told me to go look up the oath, which I will, and you mentioned the speech that Abraham Lincoln gave in 1835.
It's called the Lyceum. It's called the Lyceum speech. Lyceum. Lyceum, Lyceum speech, and look up the presidential oath of office for President of the United States.
Love it. Thank you very, very much for your time. Got to have you back. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. God bless. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Oh, and happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you too. You too.